Scene Daddy interviews.
All right, everyone, and welcome to Scene Daddy Interviews. My name is Ian, and I am here on the phone right now with the man, Jason Wisdom of Death Therapy. Jason, man, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. So we actually spoke around 2 years ago when your original album came out, The Storm Before the Calm. Now we've got Voices that will be out very, very soon. Obviously, we're recording this a little bit before that album comes out. But let me ask you a great interview question. What have you been up to for 2 years?
Well, don't flatter yourself. It's not that great of a question, but so for the last 2 years, we've the opportunity to tour in a lot of places around the world. We've got to go to Europe 5 times, actually, in the last 2 years, and toured all over the States, and toured with some awesome bands, and just trying to stay busy. And honestly, this record became a big part of what I've been doing. Like I wrote most of this record back in 2018, so It's coming out in 2019. So it was really kind of a year of process working on this record, and I'm really proud of how it came out, and I like what's there. So
yeah, you definitely should be. I mean, I've listened over and over, back and forth, and I am a big fan. Now, before we get into everything with Voices, I did want to ask, because you've been touring so much, one of the things that we talked about when we talked the first time was about the diversity in the scene and, going around. And obviously you guys are a very, very different band compared to a lot of bands out there. While you were doing that tour, did you see more diversity in the tour lineups, or was it really, similar band to similar band? How was it for you?
Yeah, it hasn't changed a lot probably since what we talked about. What I have seen is that I think there's a hunger, like there are people who really like stuff that's different, that sort of gets out of, breaks away from the mold. But at the same time, the industry just really seems to favor, and this goes across the board, not just music. I mean, fast food or whatever, like the industry tends to favor, just more of the same. Like,
sure.
Okay, social media is set up that way. You like X, then we're going to give you more suggestions that are like X. And so a band like Death Therapy, we have struggled on the road, and I don't mean that our stuff on the road has been bad. I just mean opportunities are difficult for a band like us because nobody really picks us to like fit with someone else. They don't say, oh, well, here's such and such band and they have this sound. Oh yeah, Death Therapy's just like them. Like we don't get that for anybody. Like the metalcore crowd doesn't really pick us up. The death metal crowd doesn't pick us up. We're not industrial enough for the industrial crowd. You see what I'm saying? Like, so the really big markets are also like slightly out of reach for an indie band. So like new metal market probably really like us, and the general hard music alternative market would like us, but those are harder for an indie band to get into. So yeah, it is tough. Like if you come out with a band and you're just like, okay, we want to sound like, you've seen those advertisements on social media, like four fans of, and then there's like 18 bands hashtagged. Like, I don't do that with our band. I mean, first of all, because I think it's really kind of cheesy, but also because I don't really know who to put. Like, who do we sound like? 9 Inch Nails mixed with Marilyn Manson mixed with Rage Against the Machine mixed with Rob Zombie? I don't know. Like, you know what I'm saying? I might have said Rob Zombie twice there, but it's okay. He deserves it.
No, you're all, oh, believe me, I get it. But yeah, I would even say, so if we were looking back at The Storm Before the Calm, sure, we talked about that before. You hear a little bit of Marilyn Manson, you hear a little bit of 9 Inch Nails, but even now with Voices, you switch things up enough that I don't even know if you can necessarily say that as much anymore.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's got to be tough.
Some of that comes from just like my process of writing for this band has been very stream of consciousness, even from the beginning. Sure. So I just sort of let whatever happens happen musically. It's really organic in that way. But part of that's also a little bit of intentionality. I mean, I love the way the first record turned out. It had a lot more of sort of a industrial feel. But as I said, like I never was really shooting to be like in the industrial culture. Industrial music is a very specific culture. Like
Yes.
you really have to go all in. So the few times we played with Combi Christ and we played with some other big sort of industrial bands, it's kind of like the people like our music,
Yeah.
but then they kind of walk over to our table and like, I don't know, it's almost like they can see me and go, he's a little bit too square. Like he's not, you know what I mean?
Yep.
For lack of a better term, like he's a little too white bread. I don't know what his deal is.
Right.
I mean, most people who are into industrial are a lot whiter than me, but anyway, you know what I'm saying.
I totally get it. It's very similar to the way the hardcore scene is. When you're a hardcore kid, that's what you do. You have to dress a certain way. That is your style. And it's very hard to break into that. And I think it happens with a lot of different genres, as you're mentioning. But what you're trying to do is just do whatever you want. And
right.
Like I said, got to be tough, but you're still with Solid State, right?
Yeah, they didn't drop us yet. So.
No. Well,
they hadn't given up on us yet.
Yeah, I got to think that a label like that to take, a quote unquote risk with you guys is pretty good. Have they been backing you guys so far with everything you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of an indie label. I had somebody ask me, I can't remember when it was, but it was recently. Somebody asked me, they said, so like, how does it work? I think it was somebody in a younger band. How does it work with Solid State? Like, do you record the songs and then have to submit them to the label, and the label tells you if they're good enough or if you need to change anything? And that's kind of a silly question for somebody like me who's done, tons of records for Solid State over the past 20 years.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, no, not like they're an indie label. They fund the record and they believe in what the artist is going to do. I mean, I have to imagine there have been records that came across their desk there that they've been like, oh man, I don't know about this record.
Right.
But I've never heard any stories of them or, really many true indie labels that, that tell the band, oh no, we can't release this or take it back to the drawing board. So yeah, that's one of the beauties of that. But I guess what I'm also saying is, just like what you just said, there is a level at which there's a level you can get to as a band where people stop being quite as niche-y, I guess. I think the gatekeeper mentality in the underground indie scene is so much more prevalent than once you get to the level of like, I don't know, Slipknot or somebody like that. Like metalheads love Slipknot, rock people love Slipknot, moms love Slipknot. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, basically once you get to that level, and so that, of course, we see a lot of the fallout of that when a band like Bring Me the Horizon or somebody like that sort of crosses over. Then a lot of the gatekeeper type of folks get really mad.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're like, oh no, they don't, they're not part of our little, group anymore. Which I think that's kind of ridiculous. That's a whole nother topic.
Oh, but I guess I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is we as a band, like we don't fit a niche. And even me as a person, like I love all different kinds of music.
Right.
I live in Georgia. Like it's all horrible modern country music where I live, and I'm not a fan of that, but I love country music, like classic country music, and Sturgill Simpson and like all kinds of new guys that play country. I love good hip hop music. Atlanta is like hip hop town. Like,
right.
There's great stuff all around. And so anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is I hope there are people like me who will hear the Death Therapy record and appreciate that it's not coming from one particular little box or niche.
Right. And I saw that you're going to be doing at least a couple dates with the Anchor and Stories Through Storms, who are obviously more on that kind of post-hardcore side of things. So when you go and you do a tour like that or dates like that, I'm assuming you're hoping there will be those people there that are open to what you're doing, and maybe you'll get exposure to, a set of audience that you wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, totally. We did a series of tour dates with friends of ours in a band called Comrades, who were who were totally that post-hardcore, kind of thing, indie rock kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I guess my hope, like you said, is just that we'll find people who go, hey, you know what, this isn't really my thing, but I like it. That's kind of been like my favorite compliment that people have given Death Therapy has been when they'll say, yeah, this really isn't my style, but there's something about it I really like. Because to me, if you're one of those bands that's like, well, if you really like the Devil Wears Prada, you should listen to us. Like, that's cool and all, but like, you kind of limit who's going to like you at that point. To me, it's like, it's slow going, of course, for a small band like us gaining a ton of fans. But I think we can kind of go like anybody can like us if they can just hear what we're doing. I guess
Yeah.
what I'm saying, like we don't have a limitation there.
No, very true. And I think one of the reasons why I enjoy your band so much is because it's very easy to connect to it once you start listening. Sure, it's going to be a little bit weirder or quote unquote different compared to the scene that we normally listen to, but
Right.
the message is there. The instruments, you're doing a lot of things that are different that we'll definitely get into. But one of the things I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed too, is you have been always very electronics heavy in your music. And now you see those bands like Bring Me the Horizon. You see other bands in the scene that are moving in that direction. But that's something that you've always done very well. And I can tell you many bands, and we don't have to name them here, but many bands that aren't good at putting electronics into their music. You know what I mean? Like, that is a skill. And people don't seem to, like, they kind of want to jump on that trend of, here, let me just throw in a bunch of random sounds and let me process my voice and it's going to be great. And, you know, people eat it up. You've been doing it correctly for years now.
Right.
What is that process like for you when you're doing it, when you're putting something together? Is that the first step? Is that the last? Like, how do you work that in?
So I come from a sort of a music nerd background. I was in choir when I was in high school and college and got scholarships to sing and stuff. So like I come from sort of like, you know, taking music theory classes and guitar classes and, you know, watching Dream Theater live documentaries when we'd have a substitute teacher. That's what you do in music school. But like, so I approach keyboards and electronics much more from a progressive rock standpoint. I think a lot of the bands that you're probably generally painting with that brush of like they don't do it well, they sort of approach it from I don't know, almost like a, hey, we just want to add something here. We don't know how it really relates, but we just want to put some noises because that's what other people do.
Yes.
I'm always approaching it from what other layer can keyboards or programming, what other layer can it add here? So a perfect example of that, I mentioned Dream Theater, but a perfect example of that would be my musical hero, which is Devin Townsend.
Ah, yes. Yes.
I mean, Who recently just released a new album. I have no problems plugging Devin at all times because he deserves it. But like, and I got to record a record with Devin back in 2008. Got to spend 7 weeks with him.
That's right.
Which is, I mean, changed my life. But my point is, Devin is the master of layers. And there's no point at which Devin ever puts any layer on doesn't add something or bring out something in the song. And that's saying a lot because he adds like hundreds of layers. Right. So that's the way I want to approach keyboards. So for instance, there are elements on our record that reflect my love of classic video games.
Right. For sure.
And, you know, I grew up, like, that's the thing you don't realize. I may have said this before when we talked, but like, you don't realize if you're a kid growing up who plays a lot of like, you know, classic video games, how much music is in those games. Like,
oh yeah,
that's like full orchestration programmed out in 8-bit sounds.
Yeah.
You know, especially the old games I played, like Final Fantasy, Castlevania, Mega Man, you know, which on the new record, there's a song that's sort of a tribute to Mega Man.
Yeah. Proto Man, right? Yep.
Yeah. The instability of Proto Man. So
very nice.
It's an instrumental. And anyway, so there's that, but then there's also my love of like orchestration that's reflected on the new record.
Yep.
So yeah, I have a very musical intention when I approach writing that stuff. And I don't know that every band does necessarily. I mean, particularly going back to the mid 2000s and sort of the boom of like, you know, the metalcore bands with the keyboard player. It was basically like a guy who could stand there and headbang. You know what I mean? Like he just would push down one key every once in a while and make a synth pad.
Yep.
You know, nothing wrong with those bands. That's cool. But like, I want it to be more musical than that, you know?
Right. Absolutely. So when you're writing voices, let's just take this album. When you're writing, do you start with that first? What are you actually starting with?
Oh, it always starts with the riff, man.
Okay.
Like and I think people, if they will give this record a chance, they will immediately realize that there are dozens and dozens of riffs.
Yeah, oh yeah.
On this album. It's a riff album, which is funny. So here's the funny story that I'll go off on a tangent about.
Sure.
We were invited to play a festival this past year in Germany. Well, in 2018, we were turned down by that festival because we weren't considered a real band since we don't have a guitar player. and I didn't understand that. And I told the guy, so we got to Germany this in 2018. We got there and I approached the promoter. I said, hey, thank you so much for having us. I know you were a little hesitant, but looking really forward to showing you what we do. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm from the South, you know, the Southern hospitality. I would imagine that his response would have been to me. He would have said, oh man, don't worry about it. It's going to be great. We're so glad you're here. No, he didn't say that. He instead, in his very German, like super literal way, he goes, we'll see how it goes. Like, and I'm thinking, are you serious? Like, we'll see how it goes. We just flew 5,000 miles to come, you know what I mean? To come play a show and you're not sure it's going to be okay. But his whole thing was, he said, this is a guitar festival with guitar players and you don't have a guitar player. Right. And what he understood after we played is we're actually more guitar driven in the sense of like being riff driven than most bands with guitar players. Like that, to me, that's the thing. If you're just a bass player, you can't just sit there and play chords on the bass. Right. You have to play riffs. You have to make it interesting. And so it's very riffy. So every song starts with riffs. And yeah, so at the end of it, we won them over and they invited us back for the following year. So so that's the end of that story, just so you know.
No, congrats. That's great.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, but it's one of those weird things where I'm thinking Germans don't want to hear our music. I mean, Rammstein comes from Germany. You would think they would love our style.
For sure.
But it's just like people don't get the guitar dynamic, that we don't have a guitar. But you know, I mean, anyway, that's another discussion.
No, well, for sure. And I mean, I think we can go into that a little bit more just because we're reaching a new audience with Scene Daddy interviews. So for people that don't know, you are a 2-person band. It's yourself and it's Josh. Josh is on drums, right? Is that still the lineup that you guys have?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the best way, this is important way to frame Death Therapy.
Okay.
We have been traveling and touring and everything as a 2-person band primarily. And I've had a couple different drummers play for me depending on who's available. But Death Therapy is not, like, the key ingredient is not necessarily that we're a 2-person band, because obviously there's lots of keyboards.
Right.
So we're kind of a 3-person band that travels too. However, I am totally open to the idea of having a third person on keyboards. Okay. As a matter of fact, we've rehearsed recently with a keyboard player potentially to do that some in touring this year. So I view Death Therapy as much more of like an open experience of like however we can present the music the best way when it comes to playing live. So if it's 2 people, we do that. But the difference is we don't have a guitar player, and I don't see us ever adding a guitar player, because the unique part of our sound, there's lots of bands that have keyboard players, but the unique part of our sound is what's going on with the bass, and the fact that it's an overdriven bass with an octave effect. It kind of sounds like a fuzzy guitar. Yeah. And we play live. A lot of people actually finally get to see that, because when you hear it on the record, I think you can tell it's different. But especially if a person know that that's what they're getting, they don't have any clue. We've had people come up and see us live, and they're like, "Oh, well, I was expecting a couple other dudes to get on stage." Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the defining characteristic is that they're just 2 people.
Oh, no.
But well, I mean, that is the thing for a lot of people, and that's a little part of me not wanting to be hipster. Or maybe wanting to be ultimate hipster is like, I guess we tour around for 2 years or 3 years now with 2 people, and I'm starting to see more and more 2-person bands. And there's a part of me, I don't know if anyone else is like this, there's a part of me that wants to buck against that and be like, well, if everyone else is doing it, I don't want to do it, you know?
For sure. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. So, you know, now I almost have the opposite approach. I'm going to want to follow in Devin Townsend's footsteps and be like, can we get like circus performers on stage with us and flamethrowers and like, what, you know what I mean? Like, how big can we go with this? But yeah, so there's no guitar player.
No, I totally get that. I think the outline of the band, yeah, you're right. When people see you live or they see pictures, they're like, oh, there are only 2 people there. I think the thing that separates you is what you said before, having the bass, your profession of playing bass, but changing things around so it is more similar to a guitar, but also different in the same way.
I mean, when you listen to everybody's favorite songs from Rage Against the Machine, I mean, obviously we know Tom Morello is an outstanding guitar player, right? But most of everybody's favorite riffs from Rage Against the Machine, they're just unison octaves between the bass and the guitar, like the, banner, bam, banner,
Right,
banner. They're playing the same. Like I could play that myself, doing the effect that I use with my pedal board.
exactly.
And then of course, what makes them great is he goes off on these tangents with his effects, Tom Morello and stuff. But it's largely bass driven, is what I'm saying. Like
Yes.
Rage Against the Machine is a big influence on us because it's all that riff bass driven stuff. So I guess what I mean to say is when people like the German festival kind of get hung up on there's another German festival we got invited to. They keep turning us down. They actually asked us, would we consider hiring a guitar player just to play their festival? I guess what I'm saying is I think people just don't get it. Like,
right.
It's a different thing. So
yeah, and the point is to get your music out to more people, to play more so people can see what you're actually doing. Because, I mean, this is something we talked about a lot that first time you were on the show, because it is so different compared. I mean, like you said, you would think that the German people, especially in those festivals, would be all about this because you're doing something different that sounds, it's going to be what they like, but they're not giving it a chance, right?
Right. And by the way, that's no slam on them because Germany is one of the great bastions of metal music, and I love that whenever we get to go there, I want to be there,
right?
Because it's wonderful. At the scene over there is so different. It's almost like going back in time, to what the scene was like in the States in the late '90s and early 2000s in a lot of ways. Like so.
Yeah,
awesome.
no, and believe me, I used to live in Germany, so for me, this is definitely not putting him down. This is me completely understanding exactly what you're saying. Like,
yeah, totally.
I've been around so many, I have German friends. It's just the way it is. But it's great when you're able to open people's eyes up to what you guys are actually doing. So that's the fun part about what you're doing. But it's also, let's get the music out there. Let's get people listening. And I think that this album, I think Voices is really going to do, as long as it's pushed out there, as long as it's marketed the best way it can be, I think that will help. Now, obviously, getting the features help, especially with Garrett Russell.
Yeah.
That's always a big deal. You have 3 features on this album. How'd you set up everything for that?
Yeah. So that the reason for so many features, I mean, first of all, it's a lot of features by a metal band standard, right?
Right.
But by pop music or a rap music, it's not a lot of features. I mean, some people put out records where there's a feature on every song.
Absolutely.
Or multiple features in one song.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like it hasn't been done in the music industry, but in metal, 3 features is not as common. And all 3 singles we put out were the ones with the features. And I saw somebody actually posted something, I think it was on some metal site, and they said, like, you would think that they would pick the songs that they can do live. Why would they pick these that have the guest vocalist? They can't do this live to release. And the thing is, I wrote all those songs without the feature.
Right.
And it struck me as I wrote the song, after I wrote the song, struck me this song could really go to another level if we had this feature. So
I see.
So with Garrett's part on the song Feels Like Fiction, it was like I really just felt I recorded his part ahead of time in the studio because, like, well, what if he says no?
Okay.
So if he had said no, then you would have the same song. It would just be me doing his part, which would not be nearly as awesome as it was with him doing the part. Same with the songs, the other 2 songs where the guys are doing guest vocals. I recorded those parts in the studio.
I see. Okay.
And it was basically, let's see if we can get them. Now, thematically, there's a reason for that. Not just because I think it's cool to have them on there. And there's marketing perspective of that. But the album's called Voices, right?
Right.
There's a theme throughout the record that's sort of like it's almost like a rock opera it's not quite as literally a rock opera. So there's no opera on the record, but there are different voices, different characters, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
That sort of speak within every song. So when Garrett comes in on his guest vocal, he's actually giving a different voice.
Right.
The whole first half of the song is almost like arguing, and then he snaps in and he like responds to the argument. And so that was sort of the theme that I went with this record, is almost like I let the quote unquote voices going on inside of me argue with each other within the song, which maybe that's, I'm not trying to say that's new or inventive, but for me, it was different. I've never had a thing where I let there be this sort of cognitive dissonance happening within a song where it almost seems like multiple personalities happening in a song. And then I didn't clean it up. I didn't give any definitive answers to which one of these is right, which one of these is wrong. It's just
Right.
sort of like, no, this is what's going on. And so far, a lot of people I feel like have really resonated with that. They've heard some of the songs and they've just been like, wow, that it seems like you got into my head.
Yeah.
And I'm
Oh, for
like,
sure.
well, yeah, I mean, that's what I was. I got into my own head, and I guess I'm not that unique, you know. That's one of the things we learn, I guess, as we grow up. We're not that special.
Well, yeah, and that's a great way to put it. I mean, especially when you talk about the musical style being different from other bands, to be on the same wavelength kind of what the human condition is and what we go through on a regular basis, to hit the same nerve, I think is still impressive. You know what I mean?
Right, totally. Well, and that's what I mean. To me, that's one of the common cultural things of the alternative music movement, if you want to call it that,
Mhm.
which to me that's the world that I live in. I don't live in the metalcore world or the gent world or the deathcore world I live broadly in the alternative music movement, which I feel like, that started a long time,
Sure.
decades ago. And I feel like it's all of us that sort of collectively agree, like, there are things that we need to say, there are things that we need to hear in music that are not being said by pop songs or
Right.
by, whatever. And so, for instance, when a lot of people give grief to bands like Bring Me the Horizon or Under Oath or whoever for embracing more of a pop style, that's fine. I can hear whatever their arguments are, but those bands are still giving voice to topics and content that are not common in pop styles of
That's the
music.
hope. Yeah.
So to me, they're still in the realm of the alternative music movement, even though they may be more of a mainstream thing. I mean, I like I say, I was even a fan back in the '90s. I was a big fan of, like, Linkin Park, and I mean, I was like, this is the heaviest thing I've ever heard on the radio.
Right. Right.
Of course, there were heavier things, but I was a kid in high school listening to the radio,
Yep.
and it was the heaviest thing there. And they were saying stuff that I was like, whoa, that's brutal. And, it's not brutal compared to Cannibal Corpse, but, you know what I'm saying? So,
No, exactly. Exactly.
yeah, I feel like even though I'm trying to do something a little, different with the music, I wanted to, keep tapping on that same nerve with the lyrics and stuff. So,
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, it feels a little bit like it's not done the same for sure, but it's almost a continuation of what we talked about the last time, where we kind of dove into your religious background a little bit, and what you wanted to say on The Storm Before the Calm is more people who are Christians sometimes live in that kind of fantasy world, or they preach that fantasy of everything's always good no matter what. And you're there saying, well, no, things are going badly in my
Right.
life, or you know what I mean? So in this album, you kind of continue that story arc. Now you're talking about doing it a different way with voices, and having different voices on it. But a lot of it, if you just take if you take the one with Garrett Russell, Feels Like Fiction, that seems to address that whole, well, when is that coming? I'm dealing with all
Right.
this stuff now, but it feels like an illusion to me.
Right, totally. That song, in a nutshell, is all about a guy, which is me, basically, who grew up like that. That's the thing. So, and I'll finish what I was saying, but, like, basically, on the record, there's these different voices. Usually, the guy whose life is the most screwed up, that's representing me. Like,
Right,
so it's not
right.
like I'm flattering myself on the record, but, like, that song, in a nutshell, kind of embodies the whole record in a way. But, like, it's a guy who grows up always, in the South. I grew up in the South, hearing about heaven and eternity and versus hellfire and brimstone or whatever in
Right.
church. And that's cool and all. And especially when you're really young, and stuff, that scares the crap out of you. And, like, you don't want that,
Mhm.
you want to be happy and go to
Right.
heaven. But then as you get older, you start going, okay, but wait a second, like, does it mean anything right now?
Right.
Like, what about right now? Because if God exists, like, and all he really cares about is just like, hey, man, at some point before you die, we just settle up with me and, like, we'll get you into the good place. Like, that would be a really crappy, like, purpose
Right.
for humanity. And so the Garrett's part, and Garrett is sort of famously known for this at this point. Like, his his whole thing is about like helping people now and like overcoming difficult things, which is, like I say, I wrote that song before him. And then it just made, to me, it was like, he's the guy. He needs to do this part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he seemed to really like it, and he actually came up to me in Germany at that festival and told me that he really appreciated it, and the lyrics and stuff. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. It's a similar theme to the first record in that way, but you know, like I said, it's very, for me, it's very like stream of consciousness with this kind of thing. I'm actually hearing you talk about my record. I'm discovering things, you know, as I process through it, which is fun. Like I can kind of be a fan of the music, even though I made it, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the way to be. And that's one of the reasons why I think I gravitate to what you do, is because like we talked about before, I'm not a religious person. I can see into this music to where I can tell that's probably what you're discussing or what you're, you know, arguing with yourself about. But then you can also take a lot of those tracks and you can apply it to everyday life. It doesn't have to be about religion. You could apply some of these to politics, to, you know, adversity in your life. There's a lot of things to be positive about in an album where you're speaking about what a lot of people are going through.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, I've been all over the spectrum on that kind of thing. I mean, I came up in the, I guess you could call it sort of the heyday of the Christian metal, you know, thing.
For sure.
You know, with like all the bands were around that in the mid 2000s, Under Oath and Norma Jean and Demon Hunter, and you know, they were all sort of at the primes, and As I Lay Dying, whatever, and August Burns Red. I mean, gosh, like the very first big tour that I ever did was, this was the lineup. If we didn't talk about this before, it was Demon Hunter headlining, Zayo main support, Spoken, August Burns Red, and Become the Archetype. I mean, if you put that tour together now, it would be called like the, you know, the youth group Christian tour.
Yes,
you know, like of course, Zayo's not. You know, they're not in that boat anymore. But I'm saying in the mid 2000s, I was in that. I lived in that world.
Of course.
And now here it's 2019. And, you know, I'm not necessarily in that world anymore. Like I'm a guy living in the real world. Like I have a family and a life. And so, yeah, I mean, I approach it differently, but, and I would never want to alienate anybody. I want people who are coming from wherever to, I guess, honestly, like, I think that's what you just said. Like there's universal things going on there. Like, there's a song that we just put out this past week called It's Okay.
Yeah.
And the song, basically the chorus of the song says, it's okay to not be okay. Well, the first half of the song is a dude who's just like, quit telling me that everything's going to be okay.
Right.
Which is, again, that's me coming from a place of growing up with religious folks and like, you know, just sort of wanting to pat you on the back and make a fake smile.
For sure.
Like, it's all going to be okay, man. It's like, no, I'm not okay.
Right.
So quit saying that. And then the message of like, hey, guess what? It's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And that being a total burden lifter off of your shoulders. I think, yeah, if you're coming at it from a Christian perspective, you can see that, you know, coming from that angle. But I think you can also see it coming from just like, I just needed to hear that, man.
Yeah.
I just needed somebody to say to me, it's okay to not be okay right now. Like, because yeah, I think as a Christian person, that's one of the things that pisses the world off the most with Christians is like the fakeness of just pretend it'll all be okay. Or if you know, I've been in the Christian thing for so long. I grew up in church and stuff, but dude, I can't stand these health and wealth, like, you know, send me $1,000. The guys that preach on TV late at night.
Awful.
I can't imagine if I was an atheist person, how mad those guys would make me.
Oh yeah.
Like I would be freaking furious with those guys. Like, you're taking poor people's money and promising them that their sky dad will give it back to them.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that is a joke. And I say as a Christian guy, you know what I mean? Like, so
for sure.
So I want to, I'm not looking to get into like a big conversation on like my faith and stuff, but I want in whatever little way I can to push back and say, yeah, that is garbage.
Right. No, I appreciate that because, you know, obviously I've talked to you at least twice now. I've also talked to Garrett Russell on the show, you know, 2 times or 3 times now, I forget. So I like talking to Christians, you know, people that identify as Christian are seeing all that kind of stuff that people were getting mad about for so long. But like I said, it doesn't only just go to religion. especially with the it's okay to not be okay. That's a big thing right now with mental health issues and
Right.
suicide prevention, because a lot of people are kind of force fed. Even if you're not a Christian household, your parents are still telling you, oh, you should be happy. Like, why aren't you happy? All that kind of stuff. Like, everything's going fine, but it's okay to not be okay. And I
Right.
think, different generations have grown up in different phases of that. And it depends on what band kind of said something similar to get you through those tough times. So the hope is that a track like that helps another generation get through that.
Right. Well, there's a whole generation that came before that their whole mentality was basically like you just suck it up.
Yeah.
And you pretend that it's all good until the pain goes away. And of course, we've seen where that has led. I mean, there's an epidemic of opioid abuse and people in not just physical pain but mental pain and all kinds of psychological pain. And this is not just like a young person thing. This is people in their 60s, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's an epidemic because it's not healthy to just suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that everyone needs to be babied all the time either. It's that fine line, that little place where you say, you know what, I'm not okay, and that's okay, but I got to keep moving forward also. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And anyway, yeah, I mean that's a lot of what that comes from me struggling with that stuff personally. So it's not like me, trying to get on a pedestal and come up with a message that people will resonate with. It's like, no, I've struggled with this. I've struggled with issues in my life, issues in my marriage, issues in my faith, issues in my job. I mean, what do I want to do? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's part of the suicide rates and the depression rates in the younger generation right now. Like, even the people younger than us are going through the roof. Like, it's incredibly concerning. And I feel like whether it's mental health people or politicians or pastors or whoever, if they overlook that stuff, like, shame on them. Like, they're contributing to that problem.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's skew it a little bit towards, the actual processing or the actual recording of this album. So you talk about having the different voices, which you obviously did. I did notice, some different style of clean vocals. You've always done a ton of different styles, whether it's unclean vocals, clean vocals, but I heard some new ones in this as well. Was that something you were consciously trying to do?
Not necessarily. A lot of it, to me, a good way to probably answer that would be to point back in 2018, we put out a single, which was a cover song.
Mm-hmm.
We covered Crazy by Gnarls Barkley.
Right.
And did it like a sort of a doomy, Depeche Mode kind of cover of that.
Right.
I've actually wanted to do that cover of that song since the original came out. So it's been like a long time. I've wanted to do that song. I heard it in my head. It was like, this could be cool if it was down tempo and really dark and kind of gloomy, because it fits the song. Or whether people liked it or not, I think you'd understand what I mean about the idea. And so my approach to vocals has always tried to be what does this song sound like it wants, Right. And with my previous band, Becoming the Archetype, I'll just straight up admit it. Like, I didn't have the courage to go there every time. Like, there's a lot of like, okay, can I pull this off live? What's it going to sound like? Nobody likes hearing their own voice in the microphone, kind of stuff, especially when, we were 20 years old when we signed with Solid State.
Right.
A couple of the dudes in the band were like 19, like, we were kids, and, it was just like, I didn't feel free to try everything that I could. And so Death Therapy has been therapeutic.
Right.
Death Therapy has been therapeutic for me, not just musically and lyrically, but like also with the vocals. I've been able to sort of go, okay, well, who says I can't do this? Maybe it'll be really cool. And, so yeah, I tried all kinds of stuff on this record, and I think it turned out really cool. And I hope that people, as they listen to it, they see the diversity of what's going on, as not as a distraction, but as an asset.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do, obviously, I want to check on something that we had talked about before as well. You have 2 instrumentals on Voices as well. And I just want to know, not why are they there, because I totally get why they're there. My question is, though, how do you decide on whether you're going to put vocals to something or make it an instrumental? Is that something you actually decide on?
Yeah, I mean, again, to me, it's just sort of what does the song need.
Okay.
In this particular instance, I wanted to continue the tradition of the video game instrumental,
right?
Which I did on the first record. There's a song that's a tribute to Castlevania
Yep.
on the first record. So on this album, there's a tribute to Mega Man. Honestly, I'd love to do an EP at some point that's just like video game metal music, because I think it's a blast.
Yeah.
And some people get confused because they think that they're cover songs. They're original songs. They're not. I'm not covering anything.
No, you didn't have.
They're just written in the style,
Right. Sorry to interrupt there. When I was listening to Proto Man, I was like, is he going to put the whistle in there? And you didn't. So it's a completely original song. So yeah, just to pinpoint that for people.
There's a couple little hints towards it, but can't go there because there's copyright issues. But on this album, so there's that, but then there's an orchestral instrumental on this one. Well, that was a little bit of a different scenario. Like, the last 2 tracks on this record are actually one song.
Right.
So it's like a 14-minute long song. Well, that just we broke that up just for the sake of like palatability.
For sure.
I love orchestral music, and I will sit and listen to, a 40-minute long Dream Theater song.
Sure.
But I understand that not everybody will. So that was honestly just more of like, you know what, we should probably make the orchestral thing its own track.
Gotcha.
But I think it turned out really cool, actually. People who like soundtrack music and stuff will probably really dig that song.
For sure. All right, Jason. Well, that actually seems like a pretty good place to end tonight. But before we do, I did want to ask, is there anything else you wanted to get out there? Obviously, this is being recorded before Voices comes out, but it'll probably be released maybe after it. But is there anything you want people to specifically know about Voices that we didn't get to cover?
We've covered most of it. I mean, honestly, one of the things that I want to say to people is just like, we're a band that depends on grassroots sort of word of mouth stuff. You know what I mean? We're not going to have a billboard in Times Square. So really, I just I want to encourage people to give the album a shot, check it out. If they like it, don't hesitate to share it with some people, because that's the only way it's going to get around. We're not a huge band. That's not to be self-deprecating. That's just to say, like, I know where we're at as a band. You know what I mean? We've got a couple thousand followers on Spotify, but we can reach more people if the people who really like it and get something out of it will just share it.
I agree.
Obviously, I'd like everybody to buy physical stuff. That's what all the artists say right now, and that really helps. But at this point, I just want people to check out the music, and I think it'd be rad if they did.
Well, we'll definitely have links in the description of the episode so people can, follow you for sure. Pick up the new album. I'm going to highly recommend this. I've been listening to it nonstop. Once again, it's Voices coming out on Solid State Records. Yeah, we'll have all that taken care of. But Jason, once again, I always enjoy my conversations with you. So thank you once again, man. Much appreciated.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for having me, as always.
You've been listening to Scene Daddy Interviews.
Thank you all for listening to Scene Daddy Interviews. Make sure you support the artists we featured by checking out the summary of the episode. Also, for all your scene news, reviews, and memes, make sure to follow Scene Daddy and Ian Hates on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe and rate Scene Daddy Interviews on your favorite podcast listening app for more great artist interviews in the future. Stay seen.